I want to thank the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship for opportunity to talk. I also want to thank Bev McDonald, who lives with me and is my wife, and she helped with the slides. Or actually, most of the slideshow is hers. You'll notice that the title up here is changed from your program, and that's because in talking to the fellowship a few weeks before I was supposed to talk, a shorter, less maybe academic title was suggested, at least a shorter title, and we came up with Bacon's Hand, Oxford's Drama. But I defy augury, I suppose, in the weeks ensuing, and have changed the title to Bacon's Drama, Oxford's Wild Time. And the only thing you need to know about that minor change is that the drama in Bacon is like what happened when I went to New Orleans last year and left 4 bags in the taxi cab coming from the airport. We got 3 of them out, but I forgot about the 4th one, which had my laptop and my talk. So I chased down the concourse, and fortunately the taxi was stuck in traffic, and I banged on the back window and I got it back. But that's the kind of drama I'm talking about, not a series of plays. And as for Oxford, his Wild Time, the only thing you need to know about that is that's more literal, and it's not, he went out drinking. What that is unstructured or contretemps, unstructured time. Uncultivated is a good term for that. Their lives, I'm talking about Oxford and Bacon today in comparison and contrast. Their lives overlapped, and in many ways they had common upbringing. They both were under the tutelage of Lord Burleigh, William Cecil. They both spoke many languages. They both went to Gray's Inn Law School. Gray's Inn was much more than a law school. And they had many other common themes, including worry about money. Bacon was worried about his increase in status and money within the hierarchy, and Oxford felt like he never got his due and was worried about not living up to his inherited place. The timeline for the Shakespeare plays on the far right, that's E.K. Chambers. That starts in 1591. Well, we know that he was wrong. That's a lot of books and articles still start with that 1591, but we know that it was more like 1579 or late 1570s. This is Gray's Inn Law School. As you can see, it was rather magnificent architecture at the time. This cartoon, there was a time when Bacon and Oxford people wouldn't be found in the same desert cartoon. But here they are, and on the right, standing, hatched, Deus ex machina, is the greenhorn from Stratford Tours. He's starting fresh and bypassing ground covered by decades of Baconian and Oxfordian researchers. That could be started, I suppose, in 1857 when Delia Bacon published, and right off the top, Delia Bacon, no relation to Francis Bacon, right off the top, she was very interested in collaboration and multi-authors, including not only Bacon, but Lord Derby, or Earl of Derby, Lilly, Marlowe, and several others. The idea survived even the Stratford tourism lobby. Early Oxfordians, such as Percy Allen and Montague Douglas, wrote much about collaboration, and collaboration should, I believe, not be viewed as a threat to Oxford. It's perhaps a threat to the Stratford man. Michel Foucault writes in What is an Author? I encourage you, everyone, to read Foucault. His name was mentioned yesterday, but I encourage everyone to read What is an Author? It's a short essay, and also Nietzsche Genealogy History, which is very influential in continental philosophy. His other books, Madness and Civilization, Discipline and Punish, History of Sexuality, 3 parts, are also classics. But anyway, Foucault writes, and this is very early, like 1970, disclosure that Shakespeare was not born in the house that tourists now visit would not modify the functioning of the author's name. But if it were proved that he had not written the sonnets, this would change the manner in which the author's name functions. Moreover, if we established that the same author was responsible for both the works of Shakespeare and Bacon, we would have introduced a third type of alteration which completely modified the functioning of the author's name. So this actually ties a little bit to my talk last year, that a name can be a floating signifier, a rigid designator, anchor a whole body of information. Yes, it's a biography, but it's much more than a biography in the way that it's used in the lexicon. The name Shakespeare has become a master signifier. Oops. Well, that's all right. Think of the names Walt Disney or Karl Marx. I mean, they have a lot of baggage or plural semiotic with the name. As Don Rubin asks in the Oxfordian in 2020, quote, "Have we just experienced a paradigm shift?" Says Rubin, "I certainly believe that the new evidence really is overturning the prevailing authorship framework," unquote. So opening the door to a Lilly or Marlowe risks scholars coming face to face with the themes, scenes, and knowledge base of Edward de Vere, facts that stand like elephants in the tourist rooms of Stratford. An example of useful scholarship is, I believe, the 2019 work of Barry Clark, his study, Francis Bacon's Contribution to Shakespeare, a work that is forwarded by Sir Mark Rylance. I'm indebted to Earl Showerman for suggesting that I consider this study in my talk. Clark joins with Oxfordians in supporting the declaration of reasonable doubt concerning Stratfordian authorship. So if I can get back to the previous volume, this volume, I guess I'm touching the wrong key there. This is an image of a book. As it was mentioned, I'm an antiquarian bookbinder, and I run across a lot of old Tudor and Jacobean books because I work only with old leather books. This is an image of a book called The Kabbalah. The subtitle is Mysteries of State, or the Duke of Buckingham's Private Cabinet Unlocked. Besides the title Kabbalah having ties to secret groups and mysticism and the Jewish Kabbalah, the word cabinet held secrecy. Within the title, says Samantha Smith in her unpublished 2018 dissertation, cabinet is both a box in which letters are stored and a small room, either the office where a secretary composes or perhaps a private space in which illicit sexual acts may be performed, unquote. There was, of course, an alleged relationship between the Duke of Buckingham and James I. In addition, a member of Parliament, Sir Edmund Hughes' diary entry in May 3rd of 1621 accuses Bacon with inappropriate bedroom relationships with Buckingham. So this is Earl of Essex. So going through this Kabbalah volume, I find many Francis Bacon letters that have to do with two dramas in his life. And one was the trial and execution of Essex for his rebellion against Queen Elizabeth. The other was the Spanish marriage match crisis 20 years later. He apologizes and discusses both in this 1653 collection of letters, which was expanded in the Spedding edition of Francis Bacon Letters about 1852. We got finally a complete publishing of Bacon's letters, the ones that we know about. Quote, "Her Majesty commanded me to pen that book about a small pamphlet about the Essex. Myself, indeed, gave only words and form of style, and after it had passed their allowance, it was again exactly perused by the Queen herself. She was excellent in great matters, as she was exquisite in small, whereupon it was printed de novo, and the first copies were suppressed by her peremptory commandment." So he spent a lot of time on it. A group of other authors spent a lot of time on it, and then the Queen said that he was using too many honorific terms for Essex, and instead of the Earl, he had to take out all the places he said Earl, and the copies were suppressed, and it was again printed. But it shows that Bacon prides himself in editing the writing of others. The Queen then makes it personal. She threatens that before she would forgive Essex, she would sooner marry Francis Bacon. So I thought that was an interesting insult when she's talking to Bacon and chewing him out. So then Bacon says, "I replied to the madam." This is when history came out that the Queen thought was inflammatory. And she said, "Well, we could rack the author and get the truth out." And he said, "I replied, madam, nay, he's a doctor. Never rack his person, but rack his style. Let him continue the story where it breaketh off, and I will undergo by collating the styles to judge whether he were the author or no." So moving on to the Spanish match. By 1620, the letters of Bacon show his deep entanglement with Buckingham. The trip by Buckingham and Prince Charles to Spain in March of 1623 to shore up the Spanish match has been ably explored by others. Protestant opposition to the match gives importance to the timing of the Shakespeare First Folio. In an anonymous letter, the most scandalous probably in the whole Kabbalah volume, the witness rails against Buckingham for impropriety in Spain, for putting his feet on the royal chairs, etc. Whether he, Buckingham, when the prince was uncovered, the Queen and Infanta, proposed bride, looked out the windows, whether he were not wont to come into the prince's chamber with his clothes half on, so that the doors could not be opened to him, and that the prince and the king of Spain could not come in, the doorkeepers refusing to go in for modesty's sake. This is the 18th Earl of Oxford. There's one letter in the Kabbalah volume from him asking forgiveness from Buckingham. This is Count Gondomar, who was also very influential with King James and involved in the Spanish marriage crisis. I'm not going to go into that because of time. So I'm going to go on to Montague. These are two Montague titles. The one on the left is a frontis engraving from the John Florio English translation. This is the 1632 edition. The one on the right is the 1580 edition in French. Quote, "Shakespeare was Montaigne's best reader," claims Nietzsche. But the question has always been in which language did Shakespeare study Montaigne? Montaigne's essays were available in French in 1580. Researchers have evidence of Shakespeare's access to the original, and there's been good research done that the French word born was not in Florio's English translation boundary, yet Shakespeare uses the French word born. So there are some textual evidences of Shakespeare being able to read French and read Montaigne in the original. Many scholars view Montaigne's influence in Bacon as opposite. And one example of that is the way the authors deployed temporality. For Bacon, time moves linearly in three eras: quote, "We can only reckon up 3 epochs, the Greek, the Roman, and our own." Michael McCandless summarizes this in 1990, crediting Bacon with a new perspective, a more fleshed-out description of time, a new objectivity of presence comprising a uniform, unmediated experience. So obviously Bacon is very interested in time. His title pages, the one on the right has an hourglass. The one on the left is reprinted and printed in many of his editions, and it shows a ship going out to the horizon. What are they looking for? Well, they're looking for progress, and it's also connotes a moving forward of time. Time in the modern epoch, at Bacon's time, flows as in an hourglass, then builds as an objective theme, sweeping for new horizons, as do the ships, seeking for, quote, "the endowment of human life with new inventions and riches. Time is the great discoverer, and truth is the daughter of time, not authority," unquote. In contrast, Montaigne stresses an embodied relativism of time, stresses time as something personal. Quote, "My life," says Montaigne, quote, "so brief in time, I try to increase it in weight. I try to arrest the speed of its flight by the speed with which I grasp it," unquote. Montaigne's flexible phenomenology of time finds resonance in contemporary French philosophy, in Merleau-Ponty in particular. Shakespeare lends agreement, quote, "Time travels in diverse places with diverse persons. I'll tell you who time ambles with, who time trots with, who time gallops with, and who he stands still with, as you like it, Act 3. Or, in Sonnet 123, in Sonnet 123, Shakespeare calls out time by name. Quote, "Thy registers and thee I both defy, for thy records and what we see doth lie." Or time's cowardice, as in the Comedy of Errors. Dromio, "It was 2 ere I left, and now the clock strikes 1. Adriana, "The hours come back. I never did hear of that." Dromio, "Well, if any hour meets a sergeant, it turns back for very fear." Adriana, "As if time were in debt, how fondly dost thou reason." Dromio, "Time is very bankrupt and owes much more than he's worth," unquote. For Shakespeare, poetic writing overcomes time. Sonnet 106 tells us, quote, "Not marble shall outlive this powerful rhyme. You shall shine more bright in these contents than unswept stone besmeared with sluttish time." So if I can get it here, this next slide is a newspaper filling from 1940, and it just shows that each hour on the clock has a quote from a Shakespeare play. It's called Shakespeare Around the Clock. First one is "The bell then strikes 1, Hamlet." So it goes on all through all 12 hours of the clock and takes a quote from a Shakespeare play about that hour. So obviously he knew about the new clocks that were coming into rich people's hands, as well as the clock towers. So the clocks that, pocket watches that were by 1600, they were special. The skull-clad pocket watches were also functioned as religious icons to remind the owners that time, when they opened it, they saw a skull. Time was short, so keep your eyes on the reward or punishment of the next life, not this life. That's still a theme in Christian philosophy. The first village clock towers started and stopped the workday. The master might pay the clockmaster to extend the workday on the sly. For goods, cattle, or grain, the threesome of time, money, and the futures market contracts became inseparable. This is in by 1600, in a mathematical linear regularity. J.B. Bury, in his seminal 1920 book, The Idea of Progress, credits Bacon with acceptance, even promotion of the new Protestant view of time, mathematical and not built on the numerous Catholic holy days. Colin McGinn, in his recent book called Shakespeare's Philosophy 2006, argues that the opposite view is found in Shakespeare. Quote, I argue that Shakespeare is inclined to the non-teleological view of causation. He rejects the idea of cosmic justice and the rationalist view of causation that goes with it. He sees causation as unruly, unpredictable, unintelligible, blind, weird, and paradoxical. The universe is not a place of rational, harmonious order, but of jarring and improbable accidents, bizarre conjunctions. Well, in addition to Bacon's linear view of time, he has a view of nature that needs to be taken apart, dissected for human progress. And John Locke, within a few decades, echoes this strongly in English philosophy. John Locke says, land that is wholly left to nature, that has no improvement, pasturage, tillage, or planting, is called, and indeed it is, waste. And we shall not find the benefit of it amounts to little more than nothing. And we shall find the benefit of it amounts to little more than nothing. In Troilus and Cressida, Shakespeare counters. One touch of nature makes the whole world kin. How are we doing on time?
We're just about out of it, although we can see that on your...
Well, I started late.
I started you late.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm going to skip some to the conclusion. Spectres of Shakespeare. Time is realigned here with this year's conference theme. Time to revisit Hamlet. Hamlet is speaking to Horatio. The time is out of joint, he says. This can be read the disruption of royal lineage or the advent of Gregorian over the Julian calendar. Hamlet lampoons the great chain teleology when sparring with Polonius. Hamlet, your fat king and your lean beggar is but one variable service in two dishes, but to one table. That's the end. Claudius, alas, alas. Hamlet, a man may fish with the worm that hath eat a king, and eat of the fish that hath fed of that worm. Claudius, what dost thou mean by this? Hamlet, nothing but to show you how a king may go on progress through the guts of a beggar. Well, that's a joke. That's a joke, and that's a joke on Bacon or teleology as far as I can tell. Recently, Claire Alfano has highlighted temporality in Derrida's critique of Shakespeare. Says Alfano, time, as Derrida writes, is outside itself, beside itself, unhinged. I'm going to skip again since he's standing there. Bacon agrees that all true science must aim at objective truth, and this means that the human observer must never allow himself to get emotionally involved with his subject. Consistently for Derrida, as Merleau-Ponty, time doesn't obey in the line of three parts in Aristotle. Says Derrida, what we are calling time must be given a different name, for time is always designated a movement conceived in terms of the present and can mean nothing else. This is my last slide. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, in contrast to Hamlet's wide-angled temporality, Tom Stoppard's satire, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead portrays a pair confined in the never-ending present with tragic comic results. Our epic of time, indeed, is much the time of Bacon's science. And I appreciate Bacon's science. I wouldn't, probably like many of you, I wouldn't be here without it. Carolyn Machant has written about Bacon's call for progress and control of nature in a linear way. Whether the control of nature leads to human wealth or well-being for the few, unquote, says Machant, or, quote, to the social and ecological decline for the many, depends on the underlying assumption of the narratives told by the various scholars. Bacon, as a father of science, again, I'm grateful to him. But today is the scene of Hamlet, a scene that is the abstract and brief chronicle of our time. And again, in our time, the time is out of joint, a time heralded by green trains in Europe, but millions of new consumer cars in Asia and China, clear-cut boreal forests in Canada, Brazil's Amazon burned for agriculture. Benefit for some consumers, progress at the nation level, but at full-scale disaster for the planet ecology. The Anthropocene era means 10,000 species becoming extinct each year. Philosopher Ted Toadvine has called the eco-eschatological crisis not the death of the planet, but the end of the human world as we know it. A ripeness that sees green forests cut and the earth fracked open as for a grave, an abyss where the diggers themselves might debate whether the death portended should be ruled a suicide. Thank you.